So my grandmother was married off at an early age to an elder cousin. So within the Ashantis, we usually, in the past, we used to marry our family members. This was so that wealth is retained in the family and not shared with other people. So in order to retain wealth in the family, cousins were allowed to marry themselves. So my grandmother married her cousin, older cousin. I learned that the day she was going to her husband's house, she cried like a baby. She was very young. And the reason she cried so much was because she was in love with another person. Apparently, when she's sent to the stream to go and fetch water, she was meeting up with my grandfather and they were so in love. So she was not happy with this arrangement. And this arrangement was good because from what I hear, that cousin of hers was very good to my parents. So it was like, marriage in the past was very transactional. They don't lie to anybody about love issues. Like now that you've watched a lot of fairy tales and we think marriage is about love. It's not to satisfy your love needs. Very transactional. Oh, I've seen this beautiful lady in your house. I've learned the fertility rate in this house is quite high. She can bear me a lot of children. I'm equally rich. I can take care of the children. We'll have a family. We'll have more children to farm with, and all that is very transactional. My grandmother went to the marriage and wasn't happy. 6 months after she got married, she ran back home. And she was beaten, I learned. Taken back to the husband's house. A month after she was returned to the husband's house, she ran back home again. She ran back home for almost like 6 times. And the final one, she attempted suicide. So they just have to leave her. I remember I've told you guys about my grand aunt. My grand aunt was very promiscuous. Her nickname was Patahun. And Pata means compensation. You guys have heard my English. The way you guys have made me speak English for the past few months is not easy. English for an Ashanti lady like me. I've tried though. Her nickname was Patahun. Patahun means compensation. So I think I can say Patahun means compensate yourself. She got that name through this. My mother's friend's heart was broken. She chanced on a husband having intercourse with another woman. So she came to my mother's house crying. And my grandaunt asked her why she was crying. She said she has been cheated on. My husband is cheating on me with this woman. I just chanced on them. They were doing this. They were making love. They were doing this. And my grandaunt asked her, is this the reason why you're crying? If somebody does something to break your heart, you also need to compensate yourself. That is the only way you feel better. So you need to give yourself some compensation. Within your list, find this very young man who can give you equal satisfaction and go for it. My grandaunt's name was Patahun. This very grandaunt of mine, my grandmother used to say, brought a lot of shame to their family till my grandmother also continued with the shame. So in that village, my great grandmother's children were like the stubborn ones. My grandmother was quite very reserved till she went to her own marriage and started misbehaving because she didn't want to get married to this person. She was in love. My grand aunt had dissented men long time ago. She had children with like 5 men. And these 5 men were very rich men. She used those men to acquire properties. She's the one I said ran off with the chief in our town that they had to go looking for them. She is the one I said before she died, she even cursed everybody because the man entered the room and people were saying that once the man has entered the room, this woman has had an affair with. And in her old age, she cursed everyone, saying that she knows people will say that. And in fact, she did it. This woman had no regard for relationships. She had no regard for commitment. She just didn't care. She lived a fulfilled life. She lived long. She just didn't care about men. She didn't take men serious till she died. And my grandmother's case was different. She was in love. But you know that because my grand aunt had already earned a reputation for the family, and she also started misbehaving, running back and forth from her husband's house. So our family at a point was a house nobody wanted to come in and marry from because the women, they were very stubborn. So my grandmother was in love. She didn't care about the riches. She didn't care about the money. She just wanted to be with that young man. That's my grandfather. So she attempted suicide, and the mother had to let go. So she came back home to come and learn a trade. Started seeing my grandfather in secret. So finally, they came out to say that they were in love. They wanted to get married. And her cousin was very rich and very influential in the town. So they couldn't be together. Because even when my grandmother had run home, this man was not giving her a chance to build her life. She was always around threatening my grandparents, my great-grandparents and all that to return her a whole lot of things. And my great-grandmother was not ready to do that because her daughter had attempted suicide and she was scared. So my great-grandmother said the only way they can be together is to leave the town and go and start life elsewhere. So my grandmother at a very young age, with my grandfather at a very young age, left the town, left Ashanti region. So they lived in the Brong Ahafo region. That's why I have family there. So they moved there to go and start life afresh. My grandmother is, in her young days, was tall, fair, beautiful. I told you my great-grand aunt, the one with the crazy mind, was very fair. Very, 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 very fair. You know, the kind of fairness Ashanti men want. That's why I've told because Ashanti men want fair women. When you go to funerals in the Ashanti region, you realize all our old women have under their eyes. They show many, I say. So those people were a catch. My grandmother and her siblings were a catch. So she began life with my grandfather in a different region, and it's not like those days that these days the cars are common. I remember they got a car to a certain point and they had to trek to enter that place and start life afresh. She was in love. She was blind. Everything was okay. They were fine. They were happy. Started having children. They started working on people's farms. They acquired the land. They started working together. Life was good. But my grandmother said, after she'd had her last born, she realized my grandfather was changing. And she didn't know why. Because they were so much in love. And they started having problems with money. Because in the beginning, they went there with empty hands and they were laborers on people's farms. So they knew the money they were bringing home at the end of the day. They knew how much they were making. So at a point, they looked at my grandfather was the one keeping their monies. Look at my grandfather was spending the money elsewhere. So it became a problem. They weren't happy anymore. The love stage was wearing off. They started fighting a lot, and my grandmother was, after having children, was already tall, so very thick, tall. My grandmother is strong. She's a bit masculine, and my grandfather is very frail. Where's my grandfather? He's very frail. So I remember when as a child, I used to get sick a lot, and I remember my grandmother saying that, as for this kind of every day I'm sick, it's not from my family. It's from your grandfather's family. They look like sick people. So they started having issues. They started having issues back and forth with money. My grandmother said she didn't know what was happening to him because this man just changed overnight. So someone gave her information. They had bought their own land, started their own farms. They had laborers who were working for them. And one of the laborers gave her information that your husband has another family in the next town. Apparently, when the money was coming in, when my grandmother was laboring off, when she was working hard, because my grandfather is very frail and a bit lazy. she was killing herself. My grandfather went to another town, found a woman, had same set of children he had with my grandmother. You know, in the olden days, people don't catch side chicks. So when it's time for you to marry your husband, that's when the families will come and present the children to you. We'll continue part 2.